So today we're excited to welcome a practitioner whose work centers on the belief that the body is designed to heal. When you give it the resources and environment it needs to do so. She brings a deeply integrated approach to wellness, combining science, nutrition, movement, and holistic care. Her background includes a master's degree in functional and integrative nutrition from Northwestern Health Science University and a bachelor's degree in clinical nutrition from the University of Minnesota. Her specialties include functional nutrition, naturopathy, functional fitness and mobility, myofascial and craniosacral therapy, herbal medicine, circadian biology to optimize metabolic health, gut health, and hormonal balance. In her private practice, she primarily supports women through their fertility, prenatal, and menopausal seasons, while offering couples care and also mother-child care. She also incorporates advanced functional lab testing, including hair tissue mineral analysis, microbiome testing, and more to uncover the root causes to support long-term wellness. Please join me in welcoming my granddaughter, Sydne Anne.
Hello, thank you everyone. Thank you to the club for having me. I've heard so much about all the things you all are learning and doing to better your health, and it is really inspiring, and I love to see it, especially in retirement communities. It's important to have health throughout all life stages. I think a lot of the health information gets funneled to a lot of the younger demographics, and so I'm always excited to see more health information for everyone all the way through to retirement. I am very excited to be speaking on hormones today. Raise your hand if you have hormones. Beautiful. Okay, good. We're on the same page here. So I think a lot of times hormones get lumped into just being important for fertility, which is absolutely true. Hormones are important for fertility. However, they also are important for daily life. We have hormones circulating in our bodies right now, taking care of all of these different biological, physiological processes, and so we are going to be covering that today. What are hormones? Hormones are actually chemical messengers in the body. So they are produced by all of these different glands in what's called the endocrine system, which is what the endocrine system is basically referring to the hormone production system. And these hormones travel throughout the bloodstream to regulate different bodily functions and maintain what's called homeostasis, or balance, equilibrium in the body. And they are involved in virtually every single bodily function. So we are not talking about health without talking about something that is impacted by hormones. There are many different kinds of hormonal imbalances that can impact daily life, and these are a few of the main ones. These are nothing that you need to memorize or, get super far into the weeds with, but it's great to have a good overall picture of how hormones are working in your body on a daily basis to keep you well, to keep you feeling good. And so the first form of dysfunction we see is called HPA axis dysfunction. Does anyone know what HPA stands for? Is anyone familiar with that? You can raise your hand. So the HPA, this is referring to our hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals. These are different organs in that endocrine system that I referred to that release different hormones, and specifically this HPA is in control of all of these stress hormones and your stress response in the body. So you may have heard of your fight or flight or your rest and digest response when you maybe come close to rear-ending a car or something, a little bit startling happens. Your HPA is going to kick in and give you that adrenaline boost that is going to elevate your heart rate. It's going to make you more alert and aware of what's going on so that you can deal with the situation at hand that's in front of you. Your body's taking that information from your environment. Hey, something alarming is going on, and it is creating a response so that your body can survive and deal with whatever's going on. And we also see on the opposite side of the spectrum something called chronic fatigue. A lot of people are dealing with chronic fatigue in our modern world. This often happens after a chronic state of fight or flight. So if we hear, chronic fight or flight, someone's always in this ramped up state, maybe little things like dropping a pen or little noises startle them so much that it almost feels like getting into a car accident or a bear chasing them in the woods, when really it shouldn't feel that way. That is when their fight or flight response is too heightened, it's too elevated. On the flip side, chronic fatigue is when the body just can't sustain that anymore. The body can't sustain constantly being alert and aware and having its guard up. And so that's when a lot of people fall into this chronic fatigue where they can't get into this fight or flight state. They're constantly low energy, they feel like they can't get up and get going in the morning, they struggle to exercise, struggle to get work done. And so as you can see, there are two sides of every story with these hormonal imbalances. It's not always, looking at one side is bad and the other side is good. We're looking at how can we find balance in the middle, because we need to be able to be alert and in fight or flight when we need it. We also need to be relaxed and sleeping and restoring when we need that. Two hormones that are mainly in charge of this system include cortisol and melatonin. Our cortisol is our wakefulness, our stress hormone, if you will. Not always a negative thing. We actually need our cortisol, again, to be ready to get going for the day. But then we also have our melatonin, and not only is this our sleep hormone, but it also helps with detoxification and restoration overnight. And so it's really important that we have cortisol and melatonin in proper balance at the right times of day so that our bodies can be alert when necessary, restored when necessary. Thyroid imbalances are another very common hormonal imbalance, and we see two sides of the spectrum again, our hypo or underactive thyroid. This often looks like cold hands and feet, hair loss, fatigue, constipation, weight gain. Many people struggle with an underactive thyroid in today's world. And we also see in more rare cases, but definitely still prevalent, is a hyper or overactive thyroid. And this includes symptoms like running hot, extreme weight loss, maybe struggling to keep on weight, loose bowels, anxiety, those kinds of more hyperactive on an extreme level symptoms, as opposed to the hypo or underactive symptoms. And then we also see metabolic imbalances. I'm sure we have heard of insulin. Insulin is what takes blood sugar from our bloodstream and brings it into the cells so that we can make energy. So it's a pretty important hormone there. And insulin resistance is a metabolic hormonal imbalance where we see things like energy spikes and crashes, weight gain, and a lot of other compounding symptoms down the line, and this develops further into, say, diabetes. And then we also see leptin resistance. Leptin is our fullness hormone. So if we are having an imbalance with our fullness cues, some people might experience too often feeling full, and so then they're not actually getting the right amount of nutrients that they're needing. They're not feeling hungry enough. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where they never feel full, and they continuously are eating and eating because their body isn't regulated with this signal to say it's time to stop. We've had enough nutrients, we've had enough food. And so this can cause some downstream effects: fatigue, cravings, weight gain, or even weight loss in some situations. And then we have our reproductive hormonal imbalances, which of course, like I said at the beginning, we aren't necessarily here to talk about fertility because most of us here are in our menopausal or retirement age, but it is an important puzzle piece to look at, even when you are in those life stages, because we still have these reproductive hormones. And so looking at things like progesterone and estrogen, or androgens, or testosterone, these hormones play an important role in how you feel every single day. Hormones are signals. They are not just acting randomly. They aren't just floating around and hopefully they, release at the right time or uptaken at the right time. They actually are responding to the inputs that we give them. And those inputs include nutrients, movement, and light, predominantly. Those are my favorite factors to talk about with hormones because they are so heavily impactful. There are other things as well, but we will be focusing on those ones. And so common symptoms that people experience with these hormonal signals being out of whack include the hot flashes, the fatigue, the weight gain, the brain fog, mood swings, digestive issues. And these are all signs of dysfunction. They are not random failures of aging. I think that that's another message that I hear a lot, that it's just what getting old is like, and you're just gonna have to deal with all these symptoms. And of course, there is a truth to aging, but we don't need to be suffering every single day with these chronic symptoms. There is so much that we can do to help shape our hormones, just by looking at the environment and specifically the nutrients, the movement, and the light. This is a framework for looking at hormonal dysfunction across the lifespan, specifically for women. This is more relevant. Men, we have a slide for you next, so don't worry, hormones are important for you too. But through each life stage in a woman's life, we have so many fluctuations with our hormones. There is a huge difference between women's hormone health and men's hormone health. There are a lot of the same strategies to optimize them, but we do need to consider the fact that women go through all of these different fluctuations, ups and downs throughout their life. And what we see oftentimes are these hormonal issues, these hormonal dysfunctions, they start early on, even in pre-fertility seasons of life. And so a lot of young girls are experiencing things like very severe PMS, acne, painful or irregular periods, fatigue, and those things aren't dealt with. A lot of young girls are told just to deal with their symptoms, they're normal, or they're given things like birth control or other medications to just push those symptoms aside, but they aren't looking at the actual root cause of what's causing these symptoms in the first place, which could be nutrient deficiencies or dysfunctional signaling with light, nutrient timing, maybe toxic exposures. And so behind the scenes, this dysfunction continues to spiral, and then we see the fertility season where women experience weight gain, gut issues, fatigue, mental health struggles, irregular cycles, and PMS might persist. And then this spirals again into our perinatal phase. This is that pregnancy, birth, and postpartum phases. And they might experience really symptomatic pregnancies, really symptomatic postpartums, struggling to get back to where they were with their health after having a baby. And they might experience things like volatile emotions, poor energy, fatigue, and weight struggles. And then we come to a season that I unfortunately like to call miserable menopause. And it's not always miserable menopause, but I think that that resonates with a lot of women and what they experience when they enter that season of life. They have persistent hot flashes, insomnia, metabolic issues, and increased health risks across the board. It feels like their health is just spiraling out of control. They're maybe getting all these different diagnoses of different conditions. And if we would just look at what's going on behind the scenes to cause these signals to be altered, we can address the root cause of why these hormones are becoming imbalanced and then therefore causing these symptoms. For male hormones, we see a huge decline in male sperm count. And this chart here is looking at 1980 to 2020. So you can see how much it's declined, and actually 2020 is at 50% of the average sperm count from 1980, which is a huge, huge decline. And of course, sperm count isn't the whole picture. Sperm count is indicating that we're actually looking at a problem of low testosterone. And this can cause things like muscle loss, fatigue, metabolic issues, weight gain, which can spiral into these chronic conditions long term. And so when looking at what's going on here, why are hormones becoming more and more dysfunctional as time goes on? Why were we seemingly healthier in 1980 than we are today? There are so many attacks on hormones in our modern world, and just to touch on a few of them, we have hustle culture and overstimulation. So things like scrolling. Who had an iPhone in 1980? Raise your hand. No one had an iPhone in 1980. And most households probably didn't even have very many TVs or very much screen time altogether. They likely didn't have a computer, or maybe they just had one that was shared amongst the household. And so our screen time has increased astronomically. This is brand new to the human race. This is brand new to our physiology. We also have the news and the media because they belong on this list here with overstimulation. Every single day it seems like 40 new things are popping up in our faces. We get emails every 5 minutes from people, more catastrophic events across the globe. And if we think back to, just living as a human in, thousands of years ago, we never were meant to deal with or take on the load of issues that were going on countries and countries away. We were focused on our own communities, focused on what's going on in our own environments around us, and doing what we can to improve that. And so now we have this input of things going on all across the globe. We have stress, so many stressful jobs, and stress itself is not a bad thing, but when it is overdone in a way that is simply unnatural to our biology and how it works, this can add to that load and that stress bucket that we have in our the stress bucket of the human body. And if it becomes overflowing, then that is when we see this hormonal dysfunction. And then we also have sedentary lifestyles. And this somehow fits into hustle culture and overstimulation. And I'll tell you how. We have gone from living lives of working with our hands, being very active, yet not having a lot of this mental input and stress. Where now we have tons and tons of mental input and stress. Meanwhile, we're sitting at a desk or a computer. And so this is a complete 180 to how we lived for hundreds of years. We also have a lot of endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment. This is a classification to refer to chemicals that have been found in research to alter the endocrine system and impact it negatively. And these include things like food additives, so artificial flavors, artificial sweeteners, and plenty more. Food additives are one of the biggest exposures to endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so as much as we can be avoiding these ultra-processed foods, the better. Chemical household products as well contain many endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so looking at things like what is used to scent your soap, what's used to color your soap, all of these things matter. And in my opinion, it's unfortunate that we've come to a time where this responsibility comes upon the consumer. This is a lot to take in. We shouldn't need to become scientists to figure out, food colorings and fragrances and recognizing how all of these things are impacting our health. We are kind of at that point, but there are plenty of great resources out there where you do not have to get a PhD to know what soap to buy. And I think that's very important because we don't need to be adding to the stress bucket with that as well. And then chemical personal care products as well. Things like fragrance, phthalates, in hair care products, in body washes, soaps. All of these things contain increasing amounts of chemicals. Every single year, there are thousands and thousands of chemicals added to the food and product supply. And so it is something to consider when you are equipping your home and your bathroom with your hair products. We have our environmental toxins, BPA, plastics, PFAS. These are all different names for types of plastics that are coming into our waterways and coming into our products. And so the more we can avoid plastics in our own home, the better. They are also, like I said, in the waterways, and so finding clean water is another great, it's a great thing to think about if you have the ability to do so. Pesticides, herbicides, and glyphosate, which is a type of herbicide. These are all used on our produce, on crops, and especially on produce that our livestock are eating. And so this is where buying organic or buying from a farmer is really impactful. I like to promote buying better than organic because there is the organic label at the grocery store, but oftentimes this becomes very expensive and it's still a little bit questionable. You wonder, it's the same Driscoll strawberries, but it says, one says organic, one says not organic, and we do what we can, but you do wonder, is there truly a difference here? I think it is worth it to go the organic route, but even better, you can find farmers markets and local farmers who sell their produce, and they grow their produce with organic practices. They might not have certified organic certifications, but they might have even better practices than some of the certified companies out there. We also have heavy metals. These are in plenty of cookwares, even in personal care products, chemical household products, non-native EMFs. Who here is familiar with EMFs? Just show your hand. EMFs, a few of us. Okay, so EMFs are essentially radiation from our technology that we have in our environment. And there, of course, like most of these things, there's only so much we can do about a lot of these things. We have cell phones, we have Wi-Fi, it's everywhere, and it's important to just look at your own personal environment and do what you can. Look at what you have control over. If you're constantly sleeping with the Wi-Fi next to your bed, you always have a device on you, you're never off your phone, you're never out in nature, then likely you are being overloaded with these non-native EMFs. So as much as you can do to distance yourself from technology, take breaks away from it, and take time out in nature, better. And then we also have an issue with blue light and light pollution. And I'm sure most of you in here might remember when you could see the stars before light pollution took over, maybe out camping or out in nature, maybe even at your home. At this point, it is really difficult to find areas where you can even see the stars. We have so much light pollution going on, and we will get into this on an upcoming slide, how this blue light actually impacts our hormones. And then we see deficiency and depletion attacking our hormones as well. Soil depletion is a big one. This is because of the monocropping of things like farmed corn, the GMO, like say herbicide, corn that we see, and a lot of other vegetables as well. This basically means that they're clearing the soil of anything other than what they're trying to grow. So they're using a lot of chemicals to do so. that never really get depleted because they continuously do this year after year. And so over time, our food has become more and more depleted of nutrients because the soil isn't transferring those nutrients to the food. Food processing is another issue that strips nutrients from the food. And so as much as you can get whole, real food, the more nutrients you will be intaking. And then we also have a deficiency in sunshine and nature in our culture. Maybe not down here with the sunshine, I don't know. But we see a lot of time spent indoors and on screens, away from nature, away from being out in the elements. And this is a true deficiency here. We will talk about this a little bit more in an upcoming slide. But just vitamin D alone, which is something that most people are aware of, this is becoming an increasing issue with deficiencies. How did we get here? Free time became screen time. This shows 2003 to 2015. We have screen time going from pretty low on the graph here, shooting through the roof, and we have active leisure and things including socializing, reading, writing, arts and crafts, sports, exercise, recreation. These aren't just things like sitting around and doing nothing or being bored. These are, still very active things that humans used to be doing on a regular basis, and now we are kind of flipping the script there. I don't think any child is bored ever anymore. They are always on screens, watching movies, playing games, or even us adults, we're getting email after email. There's never a free second where we feel like we can be disconnected. And we can see how this can become a huge problem for especially our nervous system and that stress response for constantly having this input. Our products became synthetic. This is showing 1970 through 2010. The difference in the chemicals that are used in products has changed drastically over time. It used to be that these products contain more natural ingredients, and now they continue to invent and synthesize new things to add to these experimental cleaning products, beauty products, all of the above. And we can also see here, this graph shows the rise in autism, breast cancer, reproductive problems, diabetes, and obesity, all of which have an endocrine or hormonal element to them. Full spectrum light became blue light. If you can see here on the left-hand side, before we had these bright white blue LEDs, we had these nice soft lights. And there is actually a scientific difference between these sources of light. On the left, we have probably an incandescent bulb, and these incandescent bulbs have the full spectrum of light, so all the way from red to blue. And just to keep that simple, red is a more calming, anti-inflammatory part of the light spectrum. So if you've ever heard of red light therapy, that's what they're utilizing there. It's more healing, where blue light is more on the stimulating, stressing side of the light spectrum. And so in balance, which is how this light is exposed to us in nature, in balance, these work well together. We can be exposed to blue light if we're getting the appropriate amount of red light. And so, for example, from the sun, we get the full spectrum of light all the way from red to blue. And from these more natural sources of light, from fire to incandescent bulbs, we get that full spectrum of light to balance out the blues. On the right-hand side, our incandescent lights, these are all very blue dominant. They have basically eradicated red light from modern lighting. It is a bit more expensive to run. That is why we've made the switch from incandescent to LEDs. But the question now is at what cost? Because now we see more light usage, now that we've switched We aren't actually turning lights off when we're not using them because they're LED, they never run out, it's all right. But then we also see the light or the health effects of that as well. And so, at what cost have we switched to the blue dominant lighting? And we can see here the example of what the sky looks like when we have no light pollution versus in the inner city. In the inner city sky, you're not going to see any of the stars, and over here on the right, you can see so much, and I don't know where you would even see anything like this today, probably in the middle of the desert somewhere. And so this is becoming a big problem worldwide, not just in our households with our TVs and our phone screens, but also light pollution as a whole. Ingredients became synthetic as well. Who here has heard, it's fine, I ate that as a kid. I ate, Oscar Mayer as a kid. It's probably fine. I've heard that plenty of times. And the issue with that statement is that these foods are not actually the same as they were before. And so we have a few examples here. Wonder Bread used to be, it looks like maybe 6 simple ingredients: wheat flour, water, sugar, yeast, salt, milk, and butter. And then you can see on the right, I'm not going to read it all out, but it is a whole long list of ingredients, additives, emulsifiers, preservatives. We have McDonald's French fries, which used to be just potatoes fried in beef tallow with sea salt. And now we have potatoes, soybean oil, natural beef flavor, wheat, milk, and a whole long list of other preservatives and coloring agents. And the list goes on here. So our processed foods before, maybe they're not ideal still. Maybe real whole foods are still better than the original processed foods. But we can see how this has become even worse over time. And this is a huge reason why a lot of the people who think, we ate this kind of processed food growing up and we didn't have any health issues, maybe why they're not understanding that today, it's much different than it was before. Again, they're constantly coming out with these new products and ingredients that they are adding to foods, and we are kind of like human experiments here, seeing what's going to happen when we add these things. And so this is what happens in the body. This is called the endocrine cascade. And there are many different directions that this can go. This isn't a black and white cascade here, but we have these causes of endocrine disruption up top. So stress, and I would consider anything that I listed on the past few slides as stress. It doesn't always have to be mental stress or a hard day at work. Stress can be a stress on the body, a toxic exposure, too much blue light versus red light. We have toxins, we have a poor diet, deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, fatty acid deficiencies, dehydration, and poor digestion. And these can lead into some hormonal metabolic imbalances, including the blood sugar and insulin imbalances, which can cascade then into the adrenals, which is our stress response. And the pituitary, which modulates our melatonin and our daily rhythms and our clock, making sure that we're awake at the right times and sleepy at the right times. Our thyroid, which manages our energy and how we feel, and then all the way down to our reproductive hormones. So again, in some stages of life, that's fertility, and in all stages of life, that's your vitality. That's how you feel on a daily basis. It's your energy, it's your weight management, and it's your disease prevention as well. And so what do we do next? I love the term rewild. It's a verb. We are returning to the wild, returning to the wisdom of nature and how our bodies were created to We have movement that is productive and outside. All of these things are included in this rewild framework. We're just returning to the wild, returning to nature, and looking at where these more modern conveniences actually could be costing us. And so out of Rewild, I have created the Rewild protocol, touching on some very important pillars in looking at natural health and holistic healing. The first one is R, reduce stress. E is eliminate toxins. W is wild movement. The I stands for intentional nutrition. L is light environment. And D is desires and alignment. So diving more into rest and regulation, that R, we are looking at things like nervous system regulation. So that nervous system again, our gas pedal, our fight or flight, our energy, getting ready to go for the day, versus our break, which is our rest, our digest, and our recovery. We want to keep that in balance. We want those things at the appropriate times. Things that are important for the nervous system include getting enough quality sleep, spending time in nature, and grounding. Grounding is, raise your hand if you've heard of grounding in here. Amazing. So grounding is when you are in nature and you're actually making physical contact with the earth, whether you're swimming in a natural body of water, whether you're barefoot on the ground. We have our work-life balance. This is very important. I think most of us here probably have a good work-life balance, right? Yeah? I love that. You have that one going for you for sure. And keeping strong boundaries. This one is very, very important. It can look different from person to person. But this can include things like learning how to say no when you maybe don't want to go to another thing, or having good boundaries with family. This is important for health too. Time unstimulated, time without the TV noise in the background, without scrolling on your phone, looking for another notification to get off your to-do list. Just time unstimulated. And then time for rest and digest. One simple thing that you can do to regulate your nervous system every single day is to get up and get outside when that sun is coming up. So watching the sunrise and getting grounded. Spending your day, the start of your day, at least 5 minutes right at the beginning, just focusing on getting that morning sunlight and getting outside, getting in nature, can be really, really regulating and helpful to the circadian rhythm, which we'll talk about in a moment. Eliminate toxins. The first thing that I recommend here is to reduce your toxic load. The first thing that you should think about when reducing your toxic load is, what do you put in your body? What are you eating? What are you consuming? Because that's going to make the most impact. We shouldn't necessarily be stressing about the 5G tower down the road if we are eating fast food every day, for example. Think about what's going in your body and make some changes there. And then number 2, focusing on what you put on your body. We absorb what we put on our skin, we absorb what we put in our hair, even through our scalp, and we breathe these things in. So another important one to look at, I would say step number 2. And then step number 3, what do you have around your body? What do you have in your home? And especially, what do you have in your sleeping environment? We spend a lot of time in our beds every single night, and so if you can make a difference there, that can make a big impact on your health. And then secondly, after reducing your toxic load, or while reducing your toxic load, supporting your detox pathways. Detoxification gets a big, it gets a big crowd, it gets a big rap these days for being something that you need to go get an expensive treatment for or buy expensive supplements for. But actually, every single day, you are supporting your detox pathways when you have a bowel movement, or when you pee, when you drink enough water, when you're hydrating and you're able to excrete things. That is a form of detoxification. Also, when you are sweating, which is easy to do here, get out there and play your pickleball or lay out in the sun. Sweating is one way that the body will release those toxins. And then movement is another one. So even just getting enough steps in your day, or maybe playing some activities, some active things throughout the day will help your detox pathways. It helps to move things and circulate things throughout your body so that you can excrete them. For W, we have wild movement. And I say wild movement because I think a lot of movement in today's world gets a little bit disconnected. We see, a lot of indoor, very intense exercise. And in the fitness world, it gets a little bit obsessive with this kind of movement. But I think what's most important is that we are just moving as part of our lifestyle. If we're just moving for 1 hour a day and then going home and not moving the rest of the day, we're not actually getting as much movement as we think we are, versus living an active lifestyle. You could actually be getting more movement and more exercise in by adding these activities to your day and just making it a part of your life. Getting outdoors and in nature, again, is so important, and so if you can integrate this with your movement, that is a great thing to do. So even just outdoor walks. Movement that you love is very important. There is an acronym called MEET, and this stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. This is just all of the movement that you do throughout your day that isn't a workout. So when you're walking to your car, when you are even walking your dog, or walking around your house, cleaning the house, doing things that you love, gardening, maybe planting, picking weeds, whatever you're doing to get that movement in, things that you love, integrating those two things together is really helpful to make that part of your lifestyle. Getting 7,000 to 10,000 steps per day, and this can be through that MEET or like the non-exercise activity, and it can also be structured walks. Fascia and posture support. So our fascia is a network of connective tissue or muscle throughout your entire body, and it is probably the most important, I would say the most important muscle of the body, because it is going through your entire body and connecting all of your muscles and all of your joints, and actually also holding in all of your organs where they're supposed to be. And this is how we are getting circulation and nutrients to those different tissues in the body. And so the more we are getting those gentle forms of movement and mobility, the better. So small exercises, just to keep your joints mobile and keep them moving, is very, very supportive of the fascia. And then we also have strength training. This is my favorite form of exercise for both men and women, especially for hormones. This helps to build muscle mass and to build bone mass. And so even if your goal is weight loss or maybe your goal is just general health, strength training is still going to be one of the best things for you so that you can build up a healthy metabolism and keep healthy body mass on your body. Intentional nutrition. Being intentional about what you're eating and putting in your body just looks like looking at your food as fuel and nourishment rather than just something to check off the list or something to do when you're hungry. So it's important that we focus on whole foods, and these include produce and animal products. Largely, there are more whole foods than that, but just to keep it simple, any of your fruits, your vegetables, your meats, dairy, eggs. A prioritization of protein is especially helpful for our hormones and hormone synthesis. And so that just looks like prioritizing meats, dairy, and eggs. Those are great protein-rich sources that you can get these nutrients from. Avoiding chemical pesticides and additives is also important. And the number one thing here is just eating real food. If that's the only thing that you do, you will be in a much, much better position to maintain long-term health and support your hormones. Even if you're not worrying about the labels, the organic labels, just eating real food makes a huge difference. And then as that progresses, you can look more into buying organic or finding farmers local to you. And then taking an individualized approach is also very important. Each one of us needs different amounts of nutrients depending on our stage of life, depending on what conditions we have, our health history, and what we do every single day. And so finding what one person said worked for them and applying that to you doesn't always work well because you have different bodies and you have different needs. So this is where getting individualized with your own health and even maybe working with your practitioner to address your own needs can be very impactful. And so again, a main priority here is just eating balanced whole food meals, if nothing else. Light environment can be summed up in brighter days and darker nights. This is the most important thing here for our light environment. Again, we see our lifestyle shifts from before where we were spending our days outside and we were spending our nights probably in caves or in little huts sleeping, and now in our modern world we are spending most of our days indoors, sedentary, and then we're spending nights up late on phones, on screens, on devices, watching TV. And so we can make these shifts to bring that back to our natural rhythms when we're supposed to be awake and stimulated and outside in the sunshine during the day, and then calm and in a dark environment at night. This is going to help our cortisol and our melatonin patterns to be in rhythm so that during the daytime you have energy and you are ready to go, ready to seize the day, and then at night you are actually feeling tired and ready for sleep. And then you get that nice restorative sleep rather than waking up all night or feeling groggy when you wake up in the morning. 5 minutes of morning sunlight, like I mentioned on the R, or regulate stress slide. This is very supportive for your circadian rhythm, which is your 24-hour clock that your body holds, so that each of these hormones can be released at the right times of day. And so in the morning, this morning sunlight signal, it triggers that clock to reset, to start. It says, hey, it's morning, we're ready for the day, it's time to ramp up energy, it's time to ramp up our metabolism. And then throughout the day, this tapers down, and then darkness hits, and we keep the lights low, melatonin rises, cortisol goes down, and we get great sleep. Sun exposure and building a sun callus. If anyone's ever had a callus from shoveling or raking or whatever work you're doing, you know that doing too much is just going to continue to rip open that skin, and it's not going to heal over. On the flip side, not doing enough, skipping a few days of shoveling, that callus might go away. It's not going to be enough to build that up with stronger skin. And so you need just the right dose to have that callus formed. The same thing happens when we get sun exposure. And so we all have probably been in a situation so then that's why we see burns, where if you strategically work your way up with your sun exposure, you're going to continue to build melanin, you're going to adapt to that sun exposure, and over time you'll be more resilient to the sun. You won't even need your sunscreen out there, and you'll know your limits. This is super important so that you are able to get out in the sun enough to get that vitamin D and all of the benefits from the sun exposure without getting any of those negative impacts like burning and all the things that come with that. Biologically supported home lighting. Like I was mentioning earlier with the light differences in our traditional incandescent bulbs versus LEDs, this is an option if you are struggling with keeping it bright during the day, getting outside during the day, and then keeping it dark at night. One option for you is to actually replace a few bulbs with some incandescent light bulbs. And then you have this more biologically supportive lighting that you can use in the evening and at nighttime that will have less of an impact on your sleep and on your melatonin. And so you will be able to sleep better instead of having these bright lights on and then struggling to fall asleep. And then circadian rhythm alignment. This again is our clock, and we're going to come back to this one again and just really dive into it because I think it's really important. It's just our internal clock that our body has so that things are happening at the right times of day. And then we have our desires and alignment. It's very important to be clear on your desires with your health, and then aligning your actions with those desires. There's something called the action behavior gap, and I don't have it up here as a visual today, but this gap, this gap is referring to when you think about wanting to do something, but then you don't do the actual steps that it takes to get there. And we've all been there. And when you sit in this gap, you know that you should be doing this, you want to be doing that, but you're not doing it. And so this stress builds up in your body and actually triggers the stress response. And so over time, this can actually cause fluctuations in your hormones and inflammation in the body. And so it's very important to get to alignment with your actions and your desires as quickly as possible. If there's something that you feel convicted to do, then figuring out how to take the steps to make that happen in your life is actually going to improve your health in many different ways. And then cultivating coherence in community and mindset. The people who you spend the time with, the thoughts that you have in your head, all of these things matter and impact your health and your hormones. And so a fun exercise that you can do is evaluate your leaks and your lifts. These are referring to energy leaks and energy lifts. So things in your life that are serving as energy leaks. These could be things like stressful relationships, maybe a pile of mail that's been sitting on your desk for way too long, a mess in a bedroom or a closet. These things are behind the scenes just draining you of energy. They're taking up space, they're taking up time in your brain, in your body. And then lifts, or energy lifts, are things that help to elevate your energy, things that you notice, a noticeable difference. After you go get coffee with a friend, you feel great. After you wash your face at night before you go to bed and read a book, you sleep so much better than when you scroll. Those would be considered energy lifts. And so this exercise would look like writing down all of the things that you see in your life as energy leaks, and then on another list, all the things that you see as energy lifts in your life, and then adjusting accordingly. Maybe picking 1 to 3 things on that leaks list that you can tackle so that you can remove that load from your brain. And then picking a few things on your list that you'd like to prioritize more often, and maybe even do in place of some of those leaks. impacted by things like movement and nutrient timing. And so the main message here is it's not just what you do, but it's also when you do it. We can be eating the healthiest food in the world, we can be doing the best exercise in the world, but if we are doing these things at 1 a.m., this is not actually supporting our circadian rhythm, and so it can still be destructive of our hormones and of our internal clock. I love this visual of the circadian rhythm. Again, not something that you need to memorize or anything, but just a cool piece of information to understand how the body's rhythms change throughout the day. And so in the morning time, you can see over there we have a rise in blood pressure. Our melatonin, or our sleep hormone, secretion stops. We might have bowel movement if we're in a good rhythm. We have our highest testosterone secretion, high alertness around 10 a.m. This would be around this time, that 8:30, 7:30 to 9 a.m. time here would be a great time to have breakfast and have a great, big, nourishing meal to set yourself up right for the day. Around noon, this would be a great time to have a nice big lunch. It's pretty straightforward. It's what most of us have probably been doing. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner times are at those times for a reason. They're actually biological reasons. And what they say is true. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And so with that, the two biggest things I recommend to keep your circadian rhythm in alignment is to get that morning sunlight and then to have a nice big nourishing meal. And then you can see throughout the day we have some other fluctuations, and then we come into melatonin secretion and deep sleep, and then the cycle starts over. These are some circadian rhythm best practices. Just a few things that tie into everything from that rewild framework with keeping in mind the timing that you do them. So we have watching the sunrise to set that morning clock. We have eating within 1 hour of waking. This is when our metabolism is ramping up. Our bodies are very efficient and effective at turning nutrients and food into positive reactions in the body rather than having negative implications like if we're doing late night eating. Eating outside when possible. Something interesting happens when we eat outside. Have we heard of spiking blood sugar at all? Insulin, if you're familiar with insulin resistance or diabetes, when our blood sugar spikes and crashes, this is a negative thing for the system, and it's also uncomfortable for us because we feel a big rush of energy, and it feels unstable, and then we also feel a big energy crash. They have found through research, through watching blood sugar in different scenarios, that when we eat outside, our blood sugar actually stays more stable than when we eat the same exact meal inside. So this can be a great strategy if you're struggling to change how you're eating, you feel attached to the things that you're eating, you're not really ready to make those changes, but you know they might be impacting you in a negative way. Just eating outside when you can actually improve the way that your body metabolizes that meal. Limiting your screen time, of course, so many reasons to do this, but also important for your circadian rhythm, staying on that clock, as much sun and natural light as we can get in a safe way, while also limiting those screens is key. Building your sun callus, again, just working your way up with sun exposure while avoiding things like burning. Using that circadian friendly lighting I mentioned, or simply just using your lights during the day, keeping it bright during the day, getting outside, and then keeping the lights low or off at night. eating and exercising during the daytime rather than at night or super early morning. I know a lot of people like to do 4 a.m. workouts with intense exercise. This is common in the fitness realm, and of course exercise is a great thing, but when we're doing it in that way, it can actually be overstressing the system, and there might be more risk versus reward in that situation. And so we should be focusing on eating and exercising during daylight, during the daytime. Again, keeping those lights low and off after sunset. Keeping a consistent bedtime and wake time. And again, it's not just what you do, but when you do it. That's really the main message with the circadian rhythm practices. And with that, I think we are ready to open it up for questions. With your handout that you have, if you got one when you came in, this is the same QR code. So this links to that Rewell protocol. It's in PDF format, and you are able to see each pillar of the Rewell protocol and simple things that you can implement.
Thank you, Sydne. We have a working microphone. Do you want to take a few questions before we wrap up then?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to run this. Comments, additional information you'd like to add, or questions that you have for Sydne?
Thank you, that was wonderful. My question is, when we're getting the daylight, should we be wearing sunglasses or not?
That's a great question. If there is a danger concern, if you're driving and you're being blinded by the light, or if you're on the water and it's really blinding, yes, I think it's a great idea to wear sunglasses. But with that said, if you're able to get sunlight in your eyes without glasses or sunglasses in front of your eyes, that actually is better for your hormonal signaling and actually for your signaling as a whole. When you're getting light through your eyes, your body is saying, okay, we need to be producing melanin so that we can deal with this amount of sunlight. Where if you are having sunglasses on, this causes a mismatch between the light signals on your eyes versus the light signals on your skin. And so you produce less melanin, and interestingly, you're more likely to burn if you're wearing sunglasses. So when you can get them off, it's a great idea.
I have a question. What about sunlight? I've had macular degeneration in my family history, and I've been advised sunglasses all the time and lots of green vegetables. So what's your thoughts around sunglasses?
Yeah, so with macular degeneration, that is a situation where you would want to, follow doctor's orders there. Definitely avoid getting too much sun exposure into the eyes. That is where that morning and evening sun is going to be more beneficial for you because it's low in the blue light and higher in those red wavelengths. And so, curious, have they mentioned anything about red light therapy at all for the macular degeneration?
Yeah.
Okay, I have seen some information out there. It could be something to look into. Red light being positive for macular health and macular degeneration as well. Yeah.
Well, I use it at home, so it's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Any other comments, questions? I see one in front.
Can you just repeat the neat acronym?
Yeah. So non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
Thermogenesis?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep, it's a longer one, but it's that any movement that isn't a workout, a structured workout.
Sydne, you might be able to help a couple of us who are complaining as a group together this week about during menopause, we get this fat around our belly, and we've heard that cortisol specifically puts the fat there. Do you have any comments about the cortisol belly?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one. It's interesting because it's our body's way. I always like to look at it as our body's way of trying to protect us. So, the body's it's getting these signals of stress. And so it's like, okay, we need to hold on to some additional fat here for safety, for survival. And of course, we're now in a world where we don't necessarily need that or want that, but we're still getting these stress signals. And so, yeah, with that, just focusing on the stress signaling, stress response, the nervous system regulation, and then really focusing on nutrition and the step count or NEAT, getting in enough movement to help that come down. Yeah.
Because I'm so fair, I have to wear the thing outside all day when I go outside. And I always worry about the absorption, and absorbing so much of that stuff all the time. Is that harmful when we talk about things that your body absorbs?
Yeah, is it a non-nano zinc? Do you know? You said zinc
It's
oxide?
blue, it's a blue lizard out of Australia. It's a good brand. I don't know. Answer your question.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be a risk versus reward situation. That one has great ingredients, it's just that you're getting a lot of zinc. And so, just potentially watching your mineral status if you get regular labs with a provider or if you're experiencing any symptoms. But I wouldn't be too worried if you're just trying to avoid burns and that's working for you. Then yeah, I wouldn't worry so much about that as long as there's not the additional additives in the sunscreen, which, like you said, the Blue Lizard is, I believe they have pretty good ingredients.
I think we are nearing our end time, so thank you, Sydney. Can we have a chorus? Post your slides. We do keep past meetings with a lot of our presentation materials, which you just reminded me of. Thank you, because at one of our past presentations, we had a full meeting by Dr. Becky Spakey, who talked about what were the good and the bad sunscreens, and we posted her recommended list as well as her bad list. And those things are all on our website under our past meetings. So thank you for coming tonight, and